We have never seen this before, as a former two-time Stanley Cup champion has opted to terminate his contract in hopes of still winning a Stanley Cup this year, and two contenders have emerged as favorites to sign this player. We're going to break down the shocking report in this episode of Hat-Trick HQ, but before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 72% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel, so if you want to stay up to date with everything that's going on in the NHL, it's free. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. But KC, we got some shocking news yesterday with Brandon Saad terminating or mutually terminating his contract with the St. Louis Blues in a very interesting turn of events. Obviously, we know that the St. Louis Blues were shopping this player. It seems like their, efforts were unsuccessful, clearly, because nobody wanted him, and he ended up now on waivers for the to buy out his contract so he can terminate his contract. And Brandon Saad, this is an official report from Chris Johnson, that Brandon Saad is sacrificing north of $5 million in salary by agreeing to mutually terminate his contract with the St. Louis Blues. It gives him a fresh start as a free agent right away who is able to pursue other options. So KC, this was a crazy report that came down yesterday. A lot of teams can use this guy. He wants to win a Stanley Cup. How do you feel about this?
I mean, this is one of the craziest situations that unfolded in a very long time here in the league, but I like this from Brandon Saad. I think this guy, he's like, I want to play in this league. I want to win a Stanley Cup. I'm willing to sacrifice money that people never get in their lifetime in $5 million to go out and achieve my goal and play the game I love. So it just really shows the character of Brandon Saad as a person, of how much he cares about the game and how much, he wants to go out there and compete. And I think if you're any other GM in this league looking at a player to go get right now, Brandon Saad has to be at the top of your list just for that reason alone.
He has to be at the top of almost every contender's list right now. And I say almost because how does he fit on certain teams? And we'll get to that in just a bit as well. But he's got to be at the top of the list because you no longer have to trade for his services. He's now a free agent. He does have to go through waivers again today at the time we're recording this, but clearly he's going to do that. He's going to be released. He's going to be a free agent and can sign with any team. And if you look at his JFresh chart, and again, this is JFresh's model. There's a bunch of different models out there. This is still a pretty decent player. This is a player that can come in and play a depth role on a lot of different teams, a third line role. And KC, I imagine this guy's going to sign for probably league minimum at this point. He terminated his contract. You can't expect a bigger contract than maybe a league minimum or more than $1 million at this point, because a lot of teams are heading into the trade deadline. They have big moves that they want to make. A lot of teams are up against the cap anyway. There are a lot of teams that can afford him, but not contenders in that way, right? So I think it's going to be interesting. But if you look at his offensive rating, his finishing, he's still in the 81 percentile in finishing. This is a guy who can still add a lot of scoring to your bottom six. And I think it's very interesting for a lot of teams. Again, his contract was $4.5 million, but bought out. He's only 32 years of age. So I think there's a lot of teams that could like a guy like this. And again, from Elliot Friedman, he will walk away from his remaining salary this season and cash next year. He wants to play in the NHL. Both player and team felt this gave him the best chance and opportunity to do so. And next year's salary cap and cap hit is 4.5 was a big hurdle for teams to acquire. So clearly they couldn't shop him. It wasn't going to be a trade, but now anybody can sign him. But I think the attitude thing, like you alluded to earlier, KC, is a big reason why a lot of teams and contenders are going to want to sign this guy. He's probably going to sign for very little, and he wants to win. He wants to win a Stanley Cup. That's what matters to him.
It's a win-win for the team and the player in this situation, because the team is getting a very, very solid bottom six player, goal scorer, guy who they can throw in the mix on their power play for a league minimum value, and the player gets what he wants, to be able to go out there and show that he's still got it at 32 years old. And I think that's the big thing here for Brandon Saad, is he's realizing, hey, I don't have very many good years left in my career. I want to try to make the best of these last, 3, maybe 4 years he has left in this league. And this is what we're seeing, him terminating his contract, opting to go to a contending team for lower value, because this guy's already made his money. He's been in the league for years and years. He's made all this money, and right now all he cares about is the game. That's what I love about Brandon Saad. I mean, this guy's a goal scorer. I think just last season he had 26 goals. He's a guy who can go out there and be an impact guy in the playoffs. We've seen that before from him. So I think there's going to be a lot of contending team GMs. I know you're going to get into that right now, that are going to be after this guy, and it's going to be interesting to see where he lands.
And before we get into contending competing teams, because there are two who have emerged, at least through reports, as favorites to sign Brandon Saad when he does clear waivers after today. You know, when you look at his stats so far this season, this is still a decent player, right? Like, he plays, a decent amount. He's averaging almost 15 minutes of ice time a night, obviously on a contender that might go down. So I think that he might have, better output in that way. He has 16 points in 43 games so far this year. He is playing a depth role on the St. Louis Blues anyway. But I think, when the cap hit goes from 4.5 million to something like $1 million or league minimum, I think that the outlook on this player will change, right? Just by default, like, you'll look at him and be like, it's not bad output for $1 million, right? So I think things will change now when he does sign a new contract eventually with one of these teams. Now, one of the teams involved, KC, love to see it, is the Toronto Maple Leafs. And obviously this was from Real Kipper and Bourne and Sam McKee on their show yesterday. And, they were saying that I wouldn't say I'm 100% excited about the idea and what the price would be, but you do see a fit. Now, personally, as a Leafs fan, right, and seeing the Maple Leafs play this year, I like the idea of Brandon Saad potentially coming in and stealing a spot away from somebody else because he's hungry. He wants to come in, earn that spot, and win a Stanley Cup. The Leafs, as of late, haven't been playing great, right? And a lot of the stuff is getting stale. So I like the idea of him coming in. I just don't know if he fits on the Leafs. I don't know how you feel about it, but I don't know if this is a perfect fit or a match made in heaven with the Toronto Maple Leafs.
I think this is an opportunity where he's a Brad Treliving guy. He comes in for cheap on this team where 4 players are making over $10 million plus, and he comes in and kicks a guy out of a job here. This is where we're just that far away from the deadline now that he could come in and Brad's like, hey, this guy's making an impact. We want to keep this guy around, and they could go flip a David Kampf. They could go flip a Calle Yarncroke here at the deadline, and it wouldn't affect this team at all. You know what I mean? It would be like, okay, we have our guy now. We have the guy who wants to play hockey. He wants to win, and that's what we need on this team, and we need him to start instilling it into the mindset of our players, because I think this is not just a perfect fit for the Leafs on the hockey side of things. I think it is the perfect fit on the leadership side in the room as well. I think this guy, he's been there. He's won 2 Stanley Cups before, like you said earlier, and he has that winning mindset that this Toronto Maple Leafs team doesn't have because they haven't experienced. So I think for about, if you can get this guy for $1 million, if I'm Brad Treliving, I'm getting him as soon as the opportunity arises, because this guy would be a perfect fit for this Toronto Maple Leafs team.
I keep saying for the Toronto Maple Leafs to find success, I feel like they need to add more players who've actually won the Stanley Cup or been to the Stanley Cup final to know what it's like to win. And I think that they need more of that. They've done a little bit of that in the past and this offseason, adding a couple, 3 Florida Panthers from last year. So they've done a little bit of that. So I think it's interesting. But the other option is, and I think that this one makes not only more sense, but by all accounts and everything that's flying around out there, probably going to happen, is the Edmonton Oilers. And multiple sources are confirming that Brandon Saad and the Oilers are meeting this week to try and work out the deals of a new contract. And if you look at this as well, if the Oilers acquire Brandon Saad, he will be the 7th highest scoring forward on the team by default. He is immediately the highest scorer in the bottom 6 in what is a down year for both he and the Blues. Now, the Oilers made some very unpopular decisions this offseason, I think, and some puzzling decisions in my mind as a fan on the outside looking in. Letting go of, obviously, Broberg and Holloway. I think that they added a lot to the lineup, and I feel like some of the guys they signed don't add much or not even close to what those guys added to their lineup in the offseason, like a Jeff Skinner. So Brandon Saad makes a lot of sense to me. He would right away be the 7th in scoring, and you can see this from Jordan Smaltz as well. Hearing some things on the Brandon Saad front, it's not official by any means, but don't be shocked if there's a possible reunion between Stan Bowman and the former 2-time Stanley Cup champion. So there is a link there as well between GM and former player who won the Stanley Cup with him. So the Edmonton Oilers, Casey, I think it's another interesting fit. I think it's probably the fit for him, especially with the cap hit that he's going to make, what the Oilers' needs are. How do you feel about it? I think that this maybe doesn't push them over the top, but this is another piece that they've been looking for.
I mean, I can already picture him in an Edmonton Oilers jersey. I think this guy is an Edmonton Oiler. He just fits the bill for this team. Their bottom 6, I hate to say it, but it looks pretty barren. They're not getting any offense from this bottom 6. Well, they are at sometimes, but not consistently, not on a consistent basis. And I think adding a guy like Brandon Saad in here who can go out and score you a goal every couple of games or get an assist on the board every couple of games and end the season with maybe a 30 point season if you're lucky. And I think this would, like you said, it puts him in as the 7th top scoring forward just on the team already. So I think this guy is the perfect fit for this Edmonton Oilers team where they need some offense down in that bottom 6. I think Brandon Saad is the guy here. And you could even throw him on this second power play unit if he starts playing good in this bottom 6, and he could even just start getting that unit going as well.
I think that he can play in almost all situations right now for the Edmonton Oilers, so I think that's something that they definitely have to look at. And I mean, again, adding a guy like that who has the Stanley Cup pedigree, he knows how, what it takes to win, playing in a depth role, maybe you even move him up to the second line depending what happens. He can play second power play unit like you mentioned. I think there's a lot of possibilities there and probably the best fit. But it's going to be interesting to watch as it unfolds over the next 24 hours. But we want to hear what you have to say about this situation in the comments. What team do you think Brandon Saad is going to go to? Because it's going to happen very quickly and it's going to be a contender. It's going to be very interesting to watch. And if you want to stay up to date with everything going on in the NHL, be sure to hit that subscribe button and we will catch you in the next video.